Councillors, staff, members of the public, I declare open this meeting of council. Advise that the meeting is being live streamed and audio recorded for the purposes of minute taking. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, pay respects to their elders past and present. Prayer this evening is to be read by Pastor Paul Collier from Busselton Baptist Church. Welcome along, Paul, and we thank you this evening for your time and your blessing of this meeting.
Do I just pray something? Oh, there we are. All right. Thanks. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for our town of Busselton. We want to thank you for the people that are here. We thank you for all the goodness and the prosperity that we enjoy in this place. We thank you that it's a growing town, and with growth comes the need for good leadership. And so I want to thank you for the men and women of this chamber that you have put into place, and that you would give to this chamber a great deal of wisdom, insight, discernment, creativity, as they plot and as they plan together, as they think, as they strategize, as they deliberate, as they make decisions. I pray that they would be decisions that would be marked by servanthood. And the men and women here have been raised up to be servants of the people of Busselton. That each councillor would not be driven by any sense of power or prestige, but rather a desire to serve and to serve well. I pray too, Father, that as decisions are made from time to time, mistakes will be made, errors will be made. It's not a perfect chamber. And if and when that does happen, I pray that there can be ownership of that, responsibility of that, not a shifting and a shirking of that, but just an acknowledgement that error has been made, and to learn from it, to grow from it, and to do better. I thank you for all that they've done for us. Thank you for each one, for the time they put in, day after day, week after week. And Father, I want to commit them to you. I do want to pray that they would indeed acknowledge that, in fact, they are here by divine design. And my ultimate prayer would be that each one would come to know you as a heavenly Father through what the Lord Jesus Christ has done for us in laying down his life. In his name, I pray it, and for the good of Busselton. Amen.
Thank you once again, Pastor Paul, for your time and your blessing this evening. We do understand if you need to leave, but of course you're welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting. We have an approved leave of absence from Councillor Michaela Love. I have no announcements and have not received any disclosures of interest. Is there a mover for item 5.1, which is to confirm as a true and correct record the minutes of the council meeting held on the 16th of August? Moved Councillor Ryan, seconded Councillor Cronin. Is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Is carried 8-0. Is there a mover for the item 5.2, which confirms true and correct record of the minutes of the special council meeting held on the 18th of August? Moved Councillor Ryan, seconded Councillor Carter. Is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Is carried 8-0. We have a response to a question taken on notice at our previous meeting of the 16th of August. The answer to this question has been provided in writing to Mr. Sims. It's displayed on the screen for the public and will be recorded in the minutes. Are there any members of the public who would like to ask a question of council? Please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, CEO and everyone else. Okay, on tonight's agenda, 14.1, adoption of corporate business plan 23 to 27. On page 6, key theme 2, lifestyle. The saltwater complete construction in the Busselton precinct and commission operations. Delivery 24-25. My question is, can you please advise why it won't be until 24-25 before the Saltwater Entertainment and Convention Centre is finished and opened?
Because I understand that the construction timeline is now that it will be completed in the second half of 2024, which is the 24-25 financial year.
I'm not entirely sure on the construction timeframe, but I do note that the action is inclusive not only of the construction but also commissioning the operations.
Yeah.
So my understanding is the intent behind that action was that it would reflect our report back to the council on that commissioning process as well as the construction. So that's sort of opening and the first part of the operating.
2025 is when you expect to have it commissioned to be operated.
The 24-25
Through the
financial year.
Through the
Okay.
24-25 financial year, when we would be commissioning and operating effectively.
So just sometime in between that. Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Are there any other members of the public that wish to ask a question of council? We'll move on to presentations by parties with an interest. First booking received is Glenda Kirby, representing residents of Eagle Bay in relation to item 11.1. Glenda, if you would like to come forward to the presentation desk. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and then councillors may wish to ask a question of you. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm here tonight as representative of the residents of Eagle Bay Association. We'd like to thank the councillors for the amendment made to the city's delegation register at the August council meeting. This is a big step forward in ensuring transparency and accountability for planning decisions made in regard to the various special character areas within the city. Transparency has been a long-standing concern with our community for many years. To our knowledge, this is the first time a special character area planning approval, the assessment process and the outcomes have been open to public scrutiny via a council meeting and prior to the approved DA being issued. This ensures clear accountability in terms of the planning decision-making process. On review of all the information provided under agenda item 11.1, there still seem to be a number of areas of uncertainty regarding some key issues on the approval status for DA 228017. It seems extraordinarily unfair for city officers to expect councillors to make a final decision on this DA approval. There are still key principles that have differing legal opinions on interpretation and precedence in relation to item 5 of Schedule 4 of the LPS, which impacts the decision before them. Setback requirements seem to attract a consensus of legal opinion and city planning recommendations. That is, the structure plan is the document of precedence. The submitted DA plans are in compliance with these setback requirements, therefore are acceptable in this regard. However, in terms of maximum building height and building bulk, as per clause 5D, the city planners appear to have ignored the same logic. The structure plan is the document of precedence. Instead, city planners have reverted to a comparison to some existing developments in the vicinity approved and built to heights and bulk in excess of those defined within the structure plan. This methodology seems bizarre by any standard. The question of how these non-compliant building specs got approved in the first place is a discussion for a different time. However, to use them as justification for yet another non-compliant development sounds like an umpire allowing an illegal tackle to go unpunished because he realises he missed the previous one. REBA engaged an independent consultant planner, Nigel Bancroft, in early August to review the proposed DA plans for Lot 301 to determine compliance with Schedule 4 and the Special Character Area policy. On Nigel's advice, a legal opinion from lawyers HWL Ebsworth was also obtained. Both the independent planning and legal opinions concluded that within Item 5 of Schedule 4 for Eagle Bay, the structure plan is the document of precedence for setbacks, maximum allowable building heights and also building bulk. At REBA's request, the lawyers sent a letter dated the 11th of September to the City, with a copy to all councillors, advising that in accordance with Clause 5D, the City is not able to approve a DA that exceeds the 7.5 height limit and 50% ratio of the upper floor in relation to the footprint, and no discretionary power exists to override this Schedule 4 requirement. Based on this advice, it would seem that the only options available for councillors to consider tonight are either defer making a final decision until all the current uncertainties are resolved and the city planners can provide an unqualified recommendation to councillors that the proposed DA is valid for approval, or decline to approve the DA. Thank you for allowing us the time to make this presentation this evening, and may your decisions be clear and justifiable. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. Councillors, are there any questions of Glenda? No, thank you.
Thank you.
The next booking we have received is also in relation to item 11.1, Tina and Lee Smith. Similarly, 5 minutes, and then councillors may wish to ask a question.
We'll do our best, Mr.
We'll do our best. Yeah.
Big night for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. It's good to see you all again. Joe, if I could get your assistance, please, just with bringing up a couple of pages of the attachments as I go, that would be great. Thank you. We're seeking approval for 1, a development, the new proposed single house, and 2, use, being bed and breakfast. I've read Councillor Ruccelli's items for debate and say the following. It is the opinion of your own planning department, and it is our legal advice that our development is consistent with the objectives of LSP 21 and the zoning of the land for residential and Schedule 4 in which the development application applies. That is in the attachments on page 109, and that is, yeah, there we go, residential zone objectives. So to provide a range of housing and choice of residential densities to meet the needs of the community. So those 3 points are all there and have been addressed by the planning team. So we do comply with those objectives. You mentioned to refuse to grant development approval based on the following reasons. Uncertainty exists around whether lawful discretion exists. This is not an issue of discretion. My lawyer's letter refer attachment 5, page 174 to the city quite clearly sets out the reasons why we comply with setbacks. They're correct for our lot, our particular lot, and clearly provides, all those reasons. So I hope everyone's had a chance to read that advice. It really helps to clarify the situation here. In the event of a conflict, the structure plan prevails. Point 16 of the structure plan specifically notes that our lot and its setbacks are 10 and 5 metres. The setbacks are determined by sector, not by density. If the setbacks were ever going to be an issue for council approval, then I asked the question why council didn't raise this with us in our first DA in 2021, showing both proposed dwellings on the site. Everyone, and we're all aware now, the DGP prevails over our land as stated in Schedule 4 of LSP 21. We don't agree to your statement, the proposal is considered to have excessive landscape and visual elements. This has been addressed by council within the attachments and the detailed report that came out last week. Your list now of items to base a refusal on, B, 2A, B and C, I point out are all items that each of our 4 direct neighbours have all had concessions made on, and they're recently completed builds. How can and why should one lot, ours, be singled out and subject to different rules? Dwelling proposed about the height. So let's talk about the height. The chimney height's a technicality. Because of the structure plan, the building height can be approved. Please refer to page 142 of the attachments. This continues on, 143, 144. The maximum height of our building is actually 7.83. I know that's like pulling at straws, not 7.87 as noted in the report. That's 33 centimetres. That's the length of a ruler. The direct neighbour, the submitter to the south, has a building height of 8.2 metres. The property is in front of us at lot 304 and has 8.6 metres. And we've been told by the local architect that Sandy Angie's house at lot 303 is also quite over height. For us though, if the chimney height is an issue, remove it. Or we can keep the chimney and comply with the 7.5 metre height limit. Make a condition, that's totally fine with us. So to talk about that 89% ground floor footprint in lieu of the 50% permitted, making the ground floor footprint larger defeats what the special character area controls are trying to achieve. So please refer to page 134 and 135 of the attachments. So you'll see there that the ground floor of the submitter's house to the south is 318.7 square metres and their upper floor is 187 square metres. Ours is 181 square metres on the ground floor. That's nearly half the size. The upper floor is 162.8 square metres. So overall, our proposed home is smaller and has less of a footprint for the area. Our lot size is much smaller than others and an additional upper floor space is required to minimise the impact on the block. Since the inception of the special character area, homes have been built over the 50% limit. There are multiple examples throughout Eagle Bay and as noted, one's directly next door to us. The precedent has already been set on neighbouring lots. To try and make an example of us is not fair and it is unjust. It will also not suit the existing streetscape. Our proposed home is modest in size for the area. I move on to the outbuilding, the wall height. Please refer to page 151 of the attachments. The outbuilding does not directly address any boundaries shared by our neighbours. It's deemed to meet the relevant design principles without further assessment. We're actually able to have a much larger shed, but we've chosen not to. If councillors prefer, we can remove the water tank and the outbuilding can be pushed further into the block, about 3 or 4 metres away from the boundary, and that could be a condition applied and would be totally acceptable. To say with certainty that regardless of whether the application is approved or refused, a legal process will ensue either at SAT or the Supreme Court is an unknown entity. The decision tonight should not be made on the basis of what might happen. It should rather be made on facts and the information at hand. The Council's Planning Department have recommended approval for the application. We need approval for our application so everyone can get on with their lives. Why should I be forced to go to SAT at a cost to me of $55,000 with my lawyer when Council have the process and the ability to make a reasonable town planning decision, one that complies with their own documents? Landowners have the right to develop their land and Council have a responsibility to give development approvals on applications that comply, are reasonable and consistent with the existing streetscape, which we are and we have demonstrated on all fronts. I have been patient, fair and reasonable throughout this process. And we just need to build our home, our family home. Should councillors wish to move the water tank and the shed location, then please make a condition to exclude the water tank and move the shed back a few metres. But please give us permission to build our forever home and its change of use. We are legally represented in this matter and will be following our lawyer's advice on our action should approval not be given tonight. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to follow up if I can. Can I have a minute or two?
Yeah.
You sure? Yep, cool. Look, just again, I just want to note that November 22, 2022 is when this application went in. We're staring at 10 months already. We want to make it clear that we know exactly where we sit in the context of Eagle Bay. We know exactly where our DA sits in the context of its location on our block and in the broader EB community. We understand that we've had the highest level of planning consideration from the City of Busselton's planning department, and the due diligence has arrived at a recommendation to approve with conditions. You know, as Tina said, we're not adverse to other conditions being applied. If it's too high, we'll lower it, put it to 7.5, give us the chimney, we'll call it even. Yeah, you know what I mean? We're here to make this work as much as we can. We want to build our forever home. Yeah, this is where we're at. So for us, that's a big one. You know, we're a bit confused as we've gotten into this, the lack of certainty around setbacks. It's great to hear Reba tonight say that they agree with the setbacks. That's a first, excellent. There's a win. I think, you know, whatever concerns that councillors have in regards to approval, let's talk about it and let's get to a solution so we can tick the box and gain approval and move on. It would be excellent. I think, you know, a summary for me is that it's, we understand that there's a hypothetical legal challenge out there. You know, we understand that that's something that has to be addressed. These hypotheticals have to be looked at. The what ifs need to be considered, that's yes. But if our DA isn't approved, and I want to be clear on this, we'll be not going to SAT to pay for a decision, as Tina said. You know, but we will be seeking our best legal advice in the best way to move forward. Yeah, and we will take that advice. I think the conditions, as we noted, we're happy to lower the height to comply. We're willing to remove the water tank and move the shed, the outbuilding, back a few metres to get it a little bit further inland, even though technically it complies with the setbacks. And we'll apply for the water tank to be fitted at another part of the block at the later date, probably down near the boundary of 305 or somewhere out the back. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do have a couple of questions from councillors. Councillor Payne.
Thanks. Can I just seek clarification on the 370 millimetres versus 330 millimetres? Is one of these numbers wrong, or is one of them measuring from a different point? Why are there two numbers?
Our drawings have always shown that we were 330 millimetres over the 7.5, and when we saw 380,
Whatever.
rather than 33 centimetres, 37 centimetres, that caught us off guard as well. I mean, it's a small number, but it's a number, yes.
It could even be a typo, I'm not sure.
Well, but it's written more than once. Mr. Needham?
I don't think 40 millimetres is going to
Yeah,
drastically alter it if it's over 7.5 is the poignant part.
Yeah.
Councillor Riccelli.
This is to Mr. Needham, please. Thank you. Obviously, you covered my points around a couple of the visual issues I was concerned with, and you know, thank you for obviously considering accommodating the height and also the shed. This question is for Mr. Needham. I guess that the issue still is around the legal opinions and whether discretion can be applied. And I'm just reading your officer comment here under the initial alternative recommendation that Councillor Ryan had, where it says here that it's highly likely that regardless of the decision that the council makes with respect to the application, in other words, whether it's approved or rejected, the matter will be subject of action in the State Administrative Tribunal or Supreme Court. How confident are you that regardless of whether this is approved or refused, that's where it's going to end up?
Look, we can only make educated guesses about those things. And that is, I guess, if you look at the sort of two key things why. We've had a look at it. We think that the most likely outcome, if it was to be tested in the courts, is that there is the legal discretion to approve the development. And especially given that, certainly at the time we wrote the report, and our expectation was that regardless of which way you go, there may be some sort of court or tribunal decision. Our view is there's a very reasonable case that there is discretion. Make a planning judgment. Make a planning judgment, because that's what you do when you've got discretion. Now, if you grant an approval and it doesn't get challenged, well, look, certainly from a city perspective, we've recommended approval. We think that's a really good outcome. We're not hoping there's a challenge. We've just tried to let councillors know. We've got now from a neighbour, I think at least 2 pieces of correspondence that indicate that they would go to the court. But look, if you're in that situation, you think you might end up in a court or tribunal anyway, make a planning decision and then let the legal issues be resolved if they need to be down the track. That's why we've made the recommendation that we've made.
Can I ask a supplementary question, please?
Certainly.
I guess from councillor's point of view, and again, I'm quoting you here. It says, unfortunately, it is considered quite clear that absolute clarity with respect to this matter cannot be achieved through the seeking and considering of further legal advice. So from a councillor's point of view, it's really difficult for us to make a decision without that clarity. What are your thoughts around that from a councillor point of view?
Well, our thoughts are that you've got several bits of legal advice, and they say different things. And we're not expecting that getting further advice is going to result in all of the different lawyers that have been asked to provide advice all saying the same thing. But I go back to our view is that there is certainly a very, very reasonable and probably a very, very strong argument that there is lawful discretion. No amount of advice will fully resolve that. Make a planning decision, because that's what you would do if you were sure you had discretion. And I think if you're sure you don't have discretion, then clearly you shouldn't issue an approval. As an organisation, decision maker, we shouldn't approve something if we're sure we don't have discretion. But you will from time to time face yourself as an organisation. We'll find ourselves in this position from time to time. And at that point, I think that you look at the risks and then most of the time I think you say, well, we'll make a decision on the planning grounds. I'm doing my best to answer the question, councillor.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillors, we now move forward to the adoption by exception resolution containing the committee recommendations for items 10.1 and 10.2 and the officer recommendations for items 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, 13.1, 13.2 and 15.1. Is there a mover for the en bloc resolution? Moved Councillor Ryan, seconded Councillor Carter. Is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried 8-0. Councillors, I put forward a notice of motion 16.1. The motion is as written that the council requests the CEO to prepare a report outlining potential recognition of Nina Kennedy. Is there a seconder for my motion? Councillor Ryan, is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried 8-0. A second notice of motion at 16.2, and I move that the council considers the introduction of a dedicated recreation facilities reserve as part of budget preparations and review of the long-term financial plan.
Question on that, if I may.
Certainly.
There was some suggestion last week when we discussed it that there would be a report coming from the CEO. Is that still?
I'm happy to include that in my motion.
if you will,
that
that'd be great.
council requests the CEO to prepare a report that considers the introduction. Councillor Ryan seconding. Is there any opposition? Not. I put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried 8-0. Thank you. We have an alternative recommendation for item 11.1. Councillor Riccelli.
I'd like to put my motion as written, please.
Certainly. Is there a seconder for the alternative recommendation? Seconded Councillor Ryan. There is opposition. Would you like to speak to your alternative recommendation?
This has been one of the hardest alternatives I've had to put through. Firstly, I want to begin by acknowledging I know how long you've been waiting, and also acknowledge your willingness to amend certain parts of this application, which you've also obviously reiterated tonight. These decisions are never easy to make. You always end up disappointing someone. But I have sought refusal for a few reasons, primarily because as a councillor there is still a clear lack of certainty as to whether lawful discretion is able to be used for this proposal. Because the issue of which setback standards apply is critical to the determination of the application. If a position is taken that the setback standards of the Schedule 4 Table Sector 3 apply, then it cannot be lawfully approved. How do we as a council make a decision for this proposal without complete clarity around this particular factor? I firmly believe that SAT may be a better suited process to provide some definitive direction surrounding which setback standards apply. I did do a site visit on Sunday and I did have some concerns around the built form on the site. Having obviously listened to some of your willingness to make some of those amendments, if it hadn't been for the first part of this reason for the refusal, then I would have quite happily put some conditions on that. So I won't go too much and delve too much into what I've written regarding the my concerns regarding the visual aspect. But I will say that I appreciate that there are neighbouring properties that have been allowed, many of the discretions being proposed. And I get this must be very frustrating for you. I'm guessing you wish you could turn back time before this decision was made for these, special character area developments to come to council. But I can't change where we're at. We are here and now, and the crux of the concerns for these special characters are around how much discretion has been allowed in the past and ensuring that the built form remains as close as possible to the developmental standards. I do believe it's crucial to set a precedent. I wish I didn't have to. I don't want to make you guys feel like the scapegoat, but I do feel like we have to set a precedent. That's why we asked for these special character areas that allow discretion to come to council. In other words, any future applicants must abide by the special character area rules as much as is reasonably possible with the block that they have, and not look to what discretions have been allowed previously. And on a final note, after discussion with officers, my understanding was that regardless of whether this application is approved or refused, that a legal process will ensue, either at SAT or the Supreme Court. Deferring the proposal, I felt, would only hold matters up, and that would have probably gone ahead if I had not put this alternative through. I also know that if I wasn't standing here, two of the other councillors would have got up and done the same thing. So I believe that this will actually be a quicker option in the long run to get a resolution for all parties involved. I'm sorry.
Councillor Ryan, did you wish to speak as seconder?
I do, Mr Mayor, thank you. This application is complex, as clear as mud, and there are a number of comments within the report which make for uncertainty, despite the officer's approval. Some of the comments include: the issue of which setback standards apply is critical to the determination of the application. This is because the city has no lawful discretion to approve any non-compliance with the setback standards that are directly set out in Schedule 4 of the scheme. Further, if the proposal is deemed to be subject to the DGP and endorsed building envelope plan setback standards, then the application is capable of approval. If a position is taken that the setback standards of Schedule 4, Table Sector 3 apply, then Council may not be capable of lawfully approving the proposal. Another one, the interpretation of which sector applies to the site is not entirely clear, as the land is identified as being in Precinct 4 in the local planning policy, but it is no longer zoned rural residential. Prior to the Pennock decision, the implications of that uncertainty were not fundamental to the question of legal discretion, but now they are. The community consultation concerns consisted of overdevelopment of the built form on the site, non-compliance with the setback standards and which setback standards apply to the site, building height and bulk, provisions of parking, use of short stay accommodation, bushfire risk and removal of vegetation. And finally, the risk assessment in the report states, an assessment of the potential implications of implementing the officer recommendation has been undertaken using the city's risk management framework, with risks assessed taking into account any controls already in place. The key risks are considered to be reputational and financial should a third party contest the lawfulness of an approval in the Supreme Court. That's our staff stating that in the report. It was argued tonight by the proponents that there are existing precedent. We are constantly told by our planning department that we cannot deal with precedent. Considering now there are 4 legal opinions and the above comments, I'll be voting to decline this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against the alternative recommendation? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. Look, I'm speaking against this recommendation and in favour of the officer's recommendation, probably for the same reasons that people have spoken in favour of this recommendation, and that's the matter of uncertainty and lack of clarity. Unfortunately, prior to the special character area amendments coming before us, we were advised of this being a particular example that has been caught up in special character area provisions. But as we've heard tonight during questions of officers and from presentations, the special character area amendment is predominantly around matters that are within Schedule 4, and we've got evidence that the structure plans and development guide plans prevail, and therefore arguments that we are making or potentially are being made about lack of certainty, for example, around discretion for setbacks. The officers have clearly indicated that, and while Councillor Riccelli has indicated that there is uncertainty around setbacks, officers have clearly indicated that it is not considered to be any significant uncertainty with regard to setbacks. So that's in relation to Councillor Riccelli's point 1. Equally, the discretion around point 2A and in relation to the height of the chimney. As we've discussed, and again, we need to remember that the discretion under the special character area amendments is discretions that relate within Schedule 4. The discretion that is being applied here around height is outside of Schedule 4 because of the prevailing nature of structure plans and development and guide plans. So that being said, there is discretion in my view. And is 33 centimetres discretion something significantly worth opposing this development? In relation to bulk and scale, again, my view is that, from listening to officers, is that the discretion is around bulk and scale, and if they've reduced their footprint on the ground floor and increased on the upper floor to accommodate sitting their property within their site, it may increase bulk in one regard, but it's reducing bulk in another regard, and generally I feel that's a logical and an outcome that makes sense. Equally, the issue of the shed, the officers have indicated that it's significantly below the permitted height of 4.5 metres and the floor area of 120. The proponents have indicated that they are prepared to remove the tank and adjust the setbacks, but I feel there's no requirement. If the officers are of the view that it is compliant and that discretion exists, then and with the legal advice that we've received, and I know it's conflicting, but if I go on the legal advice that I'm considering, I feel that this proposal should be approved, and I encourage councillors to vote against this recommendation and support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker for the alternative recommendation? Speaker. Councillor Crone.
Likewise, I'll make this brief, but sorry, I just now I've lost the information. Look, as I raised a while ago in 11.1 when we were putting my alternative motion forward on Amendment 56, one of my points of point 5 was about changing the delegation. We've had a lot of, say pressure, but concern from the community that discretion may have been given too freely in the past, and the whole point of my motion was to make sure that there was an opportunity for the public to see what goes on and how we do put these DAs forward and make decisions on them. And I have to say, in all honesty, from the briefing last week, from this week, and from the officers' comments, that I cannot, with hand on heart, say that we do clearly know what the rules are when it comes to this. There are too many unknowns. The word clear as mud came across quite a few times. And yeah, at the end of the day, it seems like somebody's got to be a scapegoat, but unfortunately, where do we stop? As the lady said, maybe if we have made the wrong decision about a tackle, do we keep going forward? We need to set a precedent somewhere, and in this case, I think council needs to make sure that the precedent is set, and if we have to take that legal advice to move forward, then so be it. But we need to draw the line somewhere, and that's why I moved that motion before, and that's why I have to stand by what we're doing today. So therefore, I would advise that you would go with Councillor Uccelli's motion on this one to not to refuse the DA. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cronin. Is there a speaker against? Councillor
I was going to speak against, but thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking against the motion because, in my view, there's a logical inconsistency inside the motion as written, because it has, putting aside A is the refusal, but inside B, two elements. One, the stating that there is uncertainty in the existence of discretion, and then two, the reasons for a refusal. However, if there is discretion in part one, then none of part two makes any sense. It relates to the case where there is no discretion. If that was the case, then part one should say that there is no lawful discretion. in order to make Part 2 make sense. However, as Part 1 says, there is uncertainty as to whether legal discretion does apply. And so I imagine the mover of the motion probably doesn't want to make that call. But they are making that call implicitly in Part 2. So I want to propose another way of thinking about Part 1. You can think about it in a binary sense, that either there is or isn't discretion, lawful discretion under Part 4 in order, Schedule 4, in order to approve it. But I don't think that is a particularly useful way of thinking about it, because we are not the Supreme Court, we're not lawyers, and nobody cares what our legal opinion is, because we don't have one. It makes more sense to think about it as a quantum uncertainty, that there both is and isn't legal discretion until such time that the Supreme Court does look at it, decide what the answer is, and then we know. And also that is the point where the discretion disappears if it was ever there. The court will look at it like there was never discretion there in the first place, but until they make the decision that says that is the case, the fact is that there is discretion available. There isn't uncertainty as to whether the discretion is there because they haven't made the decision that says that it isn't, although it would be retrospective if they did. It is unfortunate and it's unclear and it's difficult. But if we don't make a decision on what is appropriate, then we don't make any useful decision. We stand here and we say, well, there's probably no discretion. Nobody cares. What they want to know from us is 330 a big number? And it's not. In millimetres on a roof, it's a small number and it's not unreasonable. I just implore you to make a decision that someone is going to care about.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Is there a speaker for the alternative recommendation? Councillor Richards.
Thank you. And I'll make this brief because I don't really want to repeat everything that everyone has said, except that we need to protect the special character areas, and we do have conflicting legal advice. And with that and the information that the officers have given us, I support this alternative, and I feel for you because this is your family and your family home. But I need to be guided by the information that I have.
We're up to a speaker against. I will rise to speak against councillors, and I must confess to being somewhat conflicted in this. It's a very difficult case to consider, and I have some empathy for the Smiths with their initial development application several years ago, which allowed both residents essentially in the building envelopes, and there must be some certainly quizzing around how the goalposts have shifted in recent times, and for that I do have some empathy. There was and has been a change to consideration of discretion in the special character areas, and it's something that we're certainly grappling with through that. The uncertainty around the locality, Sector 3, Sector 4, and the impact that has on the development, the precedents of Schedule 4 and the Development Guide Plan and Structure Plan. Are we comfortable we have discretion? I think that the advice of officers and legal advice that we've obtained does give us that comfort, although there is conflicting advice, of course, that has been provided by other members of the community and neighbours. We need to assess a development application as presented. It is not the role of council to impose modifications to a development application once we are considering it. We must consider it in its context. It is not a planning consideration where we have the ability to impose conditional approvals, such as an extractive industry. This is the plan that's put to us, and this is what we must assess. However, I would suggest that the The items that do require discretion, if we are comfortable with that we have the discretion, are minimal and do not present out of character with the area. It would be simple to avoid the uncertainty and to build a house perhaps that complies entirely with the special character area and avoid this grey precipice that you stand upon and avoid any of those uncertainties. However, you are within your rights to present a development application and we are beholden to consider that under those planning considerations. Whether this goes to SAT or the Supreme Court, if the neighbour wishes to exercise a third-party appeal, is not a planning consideration. It is not a planning consideration. We make planning considerations and decisions under discretion, and in this case, I'll be supporting the planner's recommendation for approval. I do understand that there is uncertainty in regard to Sector 4 and the development guide plan, the structure plan, with regard to setbacks and heights, etc. But in these cases, and we've undertaken that, they are only required due regard. So we do have the discretion, but then what seems conversely, we also only have to give due regard to those elements when exercising that discretion. For that reason, councillors, I make the somewhat difficult decision in this planning case to support the officer's recommendation for approval, and we'll foreshadow that should this motion not be supported. Is there a speaker for? A speaker against? Right of reply, Councillor Riccelli.
Just a couple of things that I want to clarify. Just with Councillor Carter, I'm a little confused. Referred to setback standards not being a part of Schedule 4 and therefore they won't critical the determination of this application. That is the whole crux of it. Because if the setback standards of the Schedule 4 table Sector 3 apply, then it cannot be lawfully approved. That's what the whole issue around whether it's lawful or not is about. So just clarifying that. With regards to what Mayor Henley and also, I guess, Councillor Payne, I think, brought this up as well regarding Supreme Court. I agree, probably if your Supreme Court is the ultimate power that can give us some sort of clarity around whether this is lawful or not, but I think ultimately everyone, including the applicant, would prefer to avoid the Supreme Court process. And I just want to challenge, if it's not a planning consideration as to whether the neighbour or the objection received, the complainant, whatever you want to call them, is going to take this to the Supreme Court or not, then I just wonder why it's been included in the officer's report and their responses to our alternatives. If that's the case, then it shouldn't be in there at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riccelli. With that, I close debate and put the alternative recommendation. Those in favour? Opposed? The alternative recommendation is carried 5-3. I move on to item 14.1, amended recommendation from the staff. Is there a mover for the amended recommendation? Moved Councillor Payne, seconded Councillor Ryan. Is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Carried 8-0. Absolute majority achieved. Done those. With that, there being no further business, I declare this ordinary council meeting closed, and our next meeting will be held on the 18th of October. Thank you all for your attendance.